Tarrant Regional Water District to encourage water conservation. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean that water to meet drinking standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, and many others, to provide water conservation programs to the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of our growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people living in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you're a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler's checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home, provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There's also an event calendar where you can find information about future classes and workshops. So be sure and check out SaveTarrantWater.com to sign up for their free services.
Glad everybody's here. We're going to talk a little bit about growing tough Texas lawn, the turf. And it's not as hard as it seems, so not as hard as people think. Just kind of break down the basics of it, and that's what we're going to do in the next 30 to 35 minutes. Lawns are extremely important to us. They enhance the property value of our homes. They make the homes much more attractive than if you had nothing. And it provides a surface for outdoor activities. And one of the other things that a lot of people don't think about is the lawn is a cooling factor for our area around our home. You can imagine if you had rocks or concrete all the way around your home, how much hotter it would be, as opposed to having some nice green turf. Question that we need to ask ourselves is, do we need as much lawn as we have? You know, some of the areas where you have acres and acres of lawn, do you really need that? Could you cut down a little bit, maybe put a flower bed in, maybe put some more trees in, whatever it may be. So anyway, something to think about. There's several different types of turf for our area that will work. Our main turf, which is the one that a lot of people have, is just Bermuda. You get a common or a hybrid Bermuda, either way. It takes full sun. It doesn't take shade at all. And so it's very little water, very little cold issues. In the middle of a drought during this hot summer, if it gets really, really bad, it'll simply go dormant. It'll turn brown, and then when we'll get some rain later in the fall and it cools down, it'll turn right around and green back up. You have Zoysia, which is my favorite. It's either the Japonica or the Matrella. Japonica, it comes from the Japan area, and the Matrella comes from Manila area. The difference there is the color and the size and texture of the blades. It takes full sun, but it will also take considerable amount of shade. Then we have St. Augustine, which is take full sun, but if it's in full sun all day long, it starts to wear down a little bit, and it requires a little bit more water. It'll also take the most shade of any of the 4 turfs that we have. Then we have Buffalograss. Buffalograss is completely full sun. It's kind of antisocial. It doesn't like other people or other grasses around it, because it can't stand up to them, and the other grasses will overrun it, and pretty soon you won't have any buffalo grass left. But the nice thing about it is it requires virtually no water. Mow it 2 or 3 times a year. It doesn't require fertilization. So it's the perfect grass for an area that's out back a ways that you don't get to all the time. That doesn't have to be manicured. Bermuda grass, just a little brief history of it, is native to Southeast Africa. The earliest mention of Bermuda was back in the mid-1700s in Georgia, where it was brought to Savannah, and they really brought it over there for feed and different things there. The warm season perennial grass spreads by rhizomes, which are underground stems, and it can also spread by stolons, which are above ground stems. That's why Bermuda grass gets into everything, because not only is it going across the top of the grass, but our ground is going underneath the ground as well. It'll tolerate the widest range of soil types and pHs of any of the grasses. And again, it was originally brought over for feed or the forage value for animals. The common Bermuda is the most popular. It's what most people, a lot of people have. It's easy to take care of. It's inexpensive. very easy to install, holds up to lots of traffic, whether it be dogs or kids or whatever. And it really has a nice appearance. Comber Bermuda, though, is not shade tolerant. It requires a minimum of 6 hours of direct sunlight or more a day to be happy. Anything under 6 hours and it will start to fade out. It can be planted from seed or sod, so it gives you lots of different ways of doing that. If you choose to put sod down, you can do it basically any time of the year. If you choose to put Bermuda seed down, the evening temperatures have to be up there a little bit. So we recommend not putting it down to about mid to late May. And then anytime the rest of the year until, late September, probably. Maybe about as late as you want to put it down. It can stand up to our hot summer sun and it's extremely winter hardy. There's a nice Bermuda grass lawn. Mows easy, it looks good, nice and dark and green. And, if it's good and thick, it'll choke out most of your weed issues. Lots of different varieties. We only listed a few of them, but Celebration is a highly drought tolerant, dark and green shaded. Then you have Blackjack and Arizona Common and Panama and Riviera and Yukon are a few of the seeded varieties. And then Baby and Celebration, Tiff Green, Tiff Sport, Tifton are a few of the sodded varieties. So, it kind of depends on what you want, how you want to maintain it, what type of mower you want to cut it with, what level that you want to cut. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but we have grass that you can cut down to as low as 1/8 of an inch. And we have Bermuda grass that you can cut all the way up to 4 inches or so. So it just depends on how often you want to take care of it. St. Augustine, again, is the next one. Is great. It's one of the most popular turf grasses out there. It's got a lot of issues, and so that's something we need to really think about. It's fairly inexpensive. It's a little bit more than Bermuda, obviously, but it's easy to maintain from sod. It has a nice thicker blade than Comber Bermuda. It's more shade tolerant, requires only 4 hours of sunlight. So if you have 4 hours of sunlight a day, you can do good. If you have much less than that, you're going to really run into issues of being able to have a nice yard, and you may have a turf yard. You may have to go to some type of a ground cover. It grows easy, spreads, can be invasive in some areas, needs much more water than Bermuda. That's probably the biggest downside to our St. Augustine lawns is they require so much water. So we need to really think about that. They can stand up to the hot summer sun, but they're not near as winter hardy. And so every year when we have this freeze, and like this year was even worse, there was a lot of yards that lost some St. Augustine sod from that freeze. It's somewhat insect and disease prone, so you can see why it's not my favorite, or not the favorite that when we go about recommending lawns to areas. But each to their own. There's a nice St. Augustine lawn, got some shade. It's nice and thick. People call it a carpet grass, and it is. If it's good and healthy, it feels like carpet when you walk on it barefooted. Lots and lots of different varieties. There's a Raleigh, which is a narrow-bladed medium green. There's Palmetto, which is an emerald green, Amerishade, Floritam, Delmar, Seville, and many of the other varieties. They're currently working on some new varieties at our Extension Research Lab over in Dallas. We have quite a few acres of research being done there on turf, to where it will take up to 2 hours of only sunlight. And it's out now, and it will be available, should be available to the public in a year or two. So keep an eye out on that if that's something that you need or want. Zoysia, again, is my favorite. It's showing a lot of promises. It's between Bermuda and St. Augustine. Easy to install from sod mainly. There are a few varieties that you can put by seed, but the majority of them are sodded. It is a little bit more expensive, but when you break it down for what it gives you in return, it more than pays for itself the first year. Both thin or wide bladed varieties are available. shade tolerant, yet needs 4 to 5 hours of sunlight. So it's again, not near as shade tolerant as St. Augustine, but much more shade tolerant than Bermuda. Extremely heat tolerant and proving to be extremely cold tolerant. Very rarely do we lose it in the freezes, and it'll take every bit as much sun and heat as the Bermuda, and in most cases, really more than the St. Augustine. And then has very few diseases or insects. Here's Zoysia Palisades, one of my all-time favorite varieties. You can see it's a nice dark green, and it's very, very thick. If it's healthy, you will virtually have no weed issues because it's just simply chokes out all the other weeds. Palisades is developed by A&M. Did a really good job with that. It's one of the most shade tolerant of all of the zoysias. Emerald is an older one, variety that's been around a long time, but it's the gold standard of grasses. It's both drought resistant, cold tolerant, a slow grower, and crowds out all weeds. And that's the nice thing about zoysia. You don't have to mow as often. And again, you have very little weed problems, very little insect problems, and very little disease problems. Crown, El Toro, Jammer, or Meyer, or some of the Japonicas, Cavalier, Zorro, Diamond are some of the Matrella varieties. Buffalograss, again, is full sun, no tolerance at all for shade. Extremely low maintenance. If you have a Buffalograss yard, you could probably get by with mowing it 2 to 3 times a year. It's very well adapted for areas of annual rainfall of less than 20 to 25 inches. If you water it excessively, it gets easily invaded by weeds. And very little tolerance to traffic. So keep that in the back of your mind. 609 is a great variety. It's a native blue-green color, very compact. Turfalo is thicker and greener, a little bit more expensive and lowest slower to spread. Density Prairie 609 is another great one from sod, and then Common and Texoak and Comanche. Some of the others. So there's a Buffalograss lawn. It doesn't look bad at all when you mow it. But when it gets up a little bit taller, when you think about time to mow, it's kind of unruly looking. So it's maybe not the best turf lawn right in front of the house, but again, like I said, back in the back area where you don't get to as often, it does a real good job. Lawn maintenance. So those are our 4 basic lawns or turfs. We can do fescues, but most of the cities have banned those because of the huge water issue. So when you talk about lawn maintenance, you got the do-it-yourselfers, which is great, DIY. You got the neighborhood kid that comes around and mows the yard, and then you got lawn companies that come and do it. There's nothing wrong with doing it yourself if you want to or you like it. Or have the need to do it. Requires a lawnmower, maybe a weed eater, maybe a blower, a little bit of sprinkling going on, just a little bit of basic knowledge, and you can have a really nice yard. You get the neighborhood kid that comes and mows it. That's nice because you don't have to do it. You don't have to have the equipment, but there are some downsides to that. One is you have to pay them. 2 is that if it's a neighborhood person that's doing a lot of lawns, there's a chance they can bring insect issues from another lawn to your yard. And there's also a chance they can bring diseased issues from another yard. It might have a fungal issue or something along that line. So that's something you have to keep in mind as opposed to doing it yourself where you're not mowing other lawns. Lawn companies, hopefully if you get a good lawn company, they are a little bit more knowledgeable and they can identify pest issues and disease issues. Some of them will fertilize for you, some will do weed control, some will do pest control. It all depends on the company. But again, you got to remember they're doing, where the neighborhood kid might be doing 10 or 12 yards, they may be doing 50 or 60 or 100 yards. So there's even more of a chance of them bringing insect or disease issues in with it. Not saying that they do, there is more of a chance. So kind of keep that in mind. And again, they probably charge a little bit more than the neighborhood kid too. So three different ideas on how to do the lawn maintenance. Management of it is not that hard. It grows, grass grows, and it has to be mowed, has to be maintained. So remember that. You need to know the basic structure of a grass plant. You have the blades, which are the top part of it up here, and that's what you're cutting. The tiller is the part that's filling in the bottom, and it helps shade the top from getting too much sun on the root system. The stolons are the case where the above ground roots, it shoots out a runner, gets out to a certain point, and then stops, puts roots in, and starts the grass part again. The rhizome is underneath, and that grows underneath, and then stops, puts root system, and shoots up grass. You have the crown, which is right at the very bottom, right above the soil line, and that's where sometimes we get insect issues, sometimes we get a fungal issue, various different things there. And then obviously you have the root system here. So remember, as a rule, we don't want to cut off any more than 1/3 of the tissue or the blade at any one given time, and so that you leave 2/3 to go through the photosynthetic part of it. And that's really important. Without photosynthesis, it cannot feed itself, and you put a lot of additional stress on it. So keep that in mind as far as when you cut the grass and how often you cut it. Mowing, I saw this one time and I thought it was interesting. They're trying to mow more easier. It works, but probably not the best. There's several different kinds of mowers. If you're going to do it yourself, or what most of the people are using, is a rotary mower. It's just, whether it's mulching, it's got a bagger, or side discharge, whatever it may be. That's up to you. They're not too expensive. You can buy them anywhere from $100 to $500 or $600. When you talk about rotary, it just simply means there's a blade at the bottom that goes around in circles and cuts. The thing that we want to remember, whether it's a do-it-yourself or you're hiring somebody to do it, is keep those blades sharp. Because if you don't, they tear the leaf blade and then cause the tips to look brown. I noticed some yards the other day that a guy was mowing, and you could tell, it looked really good the first day, and then a day or two later, it just kind of looked a little bit tattered and a little bit brown. So I stopped and looked, and sure enough, it was ripping the tops of the blades. It's one way of also introducing a disease issue into your turf. So if you're doing it yourself and you're just mowing your yard, probably sharpen 2, maybe 3 times a year. Sometimes when you talk about that to people, they say, well, how do you sharpen a blade? How do you sharpen a lawnmower? I don't know anything about it. Well, there's a couple different ways. One, you can just physically take it into the shop and have them do it. 2 is, if you want to do it yourself, unplug the spark plug. You look around, you got one spark plug. Unplug, pull the cap of it off. Simply turn the lawnmower over to the side. You'll see the blade at the bottom, and it'll have one bolt going through the center of it. You undo that one bolt, pull it out, the blade comes off. You can sharpen it yourself if you have tools, or you can simply, after you've mowed, take it in by a lawnmower shop, drop it off, and they can do it for you. And you can go pick it up and put it back on the next time. Or if, what I recommend to a lot of people is, if you have a lawnmower or you go buy a new lawnmower, buy an extra blade or 2. They're fairly inexpensive, blades, $10 or $12. And when you pull it off, you just simply put the sharp one on, and then you have the dull one. You can drop it off or sharpen it at your convenience. If you have a couple of them, then you don't have to go as often. So that's one way. And so keep those kind of things in mind, but it really can make a big difference. Good commercial companies that you hire to do it, they're doing a lot of lawns, will sharpen their blades once a week. But they're cutting 50 or 60 yards each time. So try to keep that in mind. If you're using some of the hybrid varieties where you're needing to cut a little bit lower, you may want to look at a reel mower. A reel mower mows different. It's mowing, this way instead of around. And so it's a much more intricate type mower. Where that blade you take to, on a rotary mower, you take into a shop to get it sharpened, $6 to $8, $9. Take this in to get it sharpened, and it can be $30 to $50 or $60 or more, depending on how hard it is to get it off and what size it is and everything. But this is the one that will enable you to cut down to 1/8 of an inch, whereas a rotary mower that we saw before, you can, about as low as you can get is down to about 2 inches. But nice rotary mower, 100 to 500, a nice reel mower, $500 to $2,000. Here they are mowing on a golf course. They're mowing down to 0.125 inches. So it's almost like a really smooth carpet. It's very small. The good side of that, it makes it easier for the ball to roll. The bad side of it is you got to mow, depending on the particular turf, every day or every other day probably at the max, in order to keep it at that level. Because again, remember, we're only taking a third off. Sports field like this and stadium, you're mowing an inch to 1.5 inches. A little easier to do. You're still using reel mowers. Makes it a little bit easier and don't have to mow near as often. Otherwise, you can mow the 1.5 inches to 3 inches. And that's usually where we're keeping things. As we get into the summer, we want to raise that lawnmower up a little bit more so that Bermuda and some of those are mowing at 3.5 inches during the hot heat of the season. And because of that, the higher it is, that shades a little bit, keeps the roots a little bit more moist, and you don't use near as much water. So there again, there's another type of reel mower with a bagger there. One of the other things you may want to think about is, if you're having some issues with your lawn, is aerification. We see that with a lot of, especially commercial areas. We do see it in some residential areas. And golf course, on the greens and stuff, may aerify up to 6, 8, 10, 12 times a year. The homeowner, probably realistically, every other year would be good. If you really maintain it really strong, maybe every year. It's kind of up to you. You can either hire it done, or you can go to one of the tool rental places and rent an aerator and do it yourself. It's not hard. It's usually looks like a big lawnmower, and you can rent it. And ideally, you get you and your neighbors to go in with you and rent it, because it's about $60-$70 a day, and split the cost so that it doesn't cost you near as much. Main thing you want to remember when you're aerating, because you're punching holes in the ground, is if you have an irrigation system, you want to flag all your heads so that you're not aerating the heads too. That's not a good thing. Here's a bigger one that we do for when we're going in and doing turf for stadiums and different things. A little bit easier to take care of. There's a smaller one. And so why do we need to aerify? We need to aerify because we're getting too much compaction. Start using big tractors and heavy machines. It just compacts it after a while. And if it gets too compacted, then they can't breathe very well. Water can't percolate down to the root system. And so that becomes an issue there. Vertical mowers, if we get too much thatch. Thatch is something that happens periodically. If we maintain our yard well, you shouldn't get very much, but sometimes we do. And it's just a decomposed cuttings and different things that are on your ground that are kind of matted down at the lower and are kind of covering the crown. So it's below the tiller and below the blades. And it can mat and get so dense that, again, it, not only does no water gets to it, but not as much air, not as much sunlight. And so it can really change the look of your total yard. So if you need it, you got a lot of thatch issue, you may want to go in and do a vertical mower or a dethatcher. But that's usually not as often, maybe every 3 or 4 years, if you're taking care of it right. There's one that was really bad, so they're going in, you can see, here's the lawn here, here's where they've gone through and dethatched it and pulled out all that extra thatch that was just built up. And so the knife blades go in and cut it, and then they pull it up to the top. And then you can either rake it up or bag it or whatever to get it out of there. This allows your sod and turf to breathe a little better, and then you have a better percolation of water down through it. Mulching mower is the best thing to do, again, because that takes all those blades that you cut and it mulches them all real fine, and then puts them back down on the lawn as you mow. That takes all the nutrients and all the water that were in that grass, and it takes them, returns them right back down to the soil. And by doing that, you don't have to water as often, you don't have to fertilize as often, and with the mulching mower, it's cutting up so fine, you don't have as big a thatch issue. But again, you can see why it's important to sharpen those blades. If you're going to fertilize or put grass seed or whatever it may be down, you're going to have to use some type of a spreader. So you may have a rotary spreader like this, where you fill up your hopper and it drops down and then it slings it out, and as you go and broadcast it. That's good for a large area, not so good for a real small lawn that has a lot of sidewalks and driveways there. And if they have a lot of sidewalks and driveways, you don't want to get your fertilizer up on the driveways and sidewalks or the concrete, because number one, it doesn't do any good. Number two, if you get it up there and then you get rain or you irrigate and you get water up there, the breakdown of that fertilizer can actually pit and cause issues to your concrete. So it's great if you have a big area, but you want to be careful if you have a small area. If you have a small area, you want to use a drop spreader like this that just simply drops it right below in between these wheels and drops it in a fine area right here, and you don't have that issue. So 2 different kinds of fertilizer spreaders. Weeds, unfortunately, we do have weeds. People say, what can I do? Well, you can fight it. You can do a lot of different things. Pre-emergent program is the easiest thing to do, no matter if it's Bermuda, or if it's Zoysia, or St. Augustine, or whatever it may be. Just get on a program, whether you're doing it yourself or you're having it done. We recommend Valentine's Day and Labor Day. Not that it has to be done that particular day, but it just gives you kind of a time of the year to do it. It's 6 months apart, so that you're applying every 6 months. And most of your pre-emergents have a 6-month residual. So that kind of covers you. If it's a week or 2 or 3 later, or a week or 2 or 3 earlier, that's fine. It's just kind of easy to remember Valentine's Day and Labor Day. Get that done, and after a year or 2 of doing it that way, that'll take care of 80–85% of your lawn weeds. If I'm fertilizing good as necessary and watering is necessary and maintaining it is necessary, the grass is going to be strong enough and thick enough that it's going to choke out most of your weeds anyway. If for some reason you're still not getting it all, you may want to go to a post-emergent program, and that's only as needed, where you're applying a chemical control, more spot treating on a certain weed or something to help get rid of it. The thing about it is, Dallas grass or one of the different grasses like that is, if you've got an issue and it's only in those spotted areas, do I want to put another chemical down, or do I want to just simply go over and use a knife or a shovel or something and dig that weed up so that you don't have to do that? Then you can treat it either organic or inorganic. There are some organic treatments to control weeds, and then there are inorganic treatments to control weeds. It's not for me to tell you which one you should do, and I'm only here to tell you the options. So you choose. Organic treatments take a little bit longer. Inorganic treatments are quicker, but they are usually not very selective. So they'll kill just about anything that they get on. So you have to really be careful. Now, one of the things that, we have to think about is that one. That's an issue that we see a lot, and that's Dallas grass. So you have a good turf area here, fairly thick and fairly looking good. Then you have this patch of Dallas grass here. And I can pre-emergent rarely will take care of that, so I have to use a post-emergent. I can spray it and try to kill it, but then I have a pretty good sized area here. I can come in with a knife or shovel and try to physically remove it. So I'm only have a few pieces like that. That's really the better way. It's up to you if you want to get out on your hands and knees to do that. So anyway, keep that in mind. There's the seeds of Dallas grass. You can see why it spreads. And you let it go to seed, then it gets up there and it comes to ripe, and then the wind will blow it and it'll start germinating in other parts of your yard. So if nothing else, you want to make sure that as soon as it starts to set seed, you cut it and get it out of there. Here's the root cess of Dallas grass. You can see why it's so tough to get rid of. It's very thick and very tubular, so that there's a lot of root system. So not only getting the top out of there, but you got to get the bottom out. You can see how thick the root system on. So the other thing that we see at the beginning of each year is hen dip. It's easy to recognize because it has a kind of a light green leaf with the purple flowers. You see it depending on the year, anywhere from late January into February, sometimes into March. It's a winter annual. It can be treated, though, really fairly well with pre-emergent. If for some reason you're not getting a good job on that, instead of using a post-emergent, we suggest get your lawnmower out a little bit earlier. Because if you mow it, after a couple, 2 or 3 mowings, you've exhausted it completely and it'll just fade away. And to me, that's better than having to go out and spray some type of a chemical on. And that's what it looks like up close. Here's another less, but see, these is got a woody stem. It's much more tougher to control. It's a summer annual, and again, you may digging it up, or you may have to use some type of post-emergent to it. Here are some of the different chemicals that you can use if you choose to go that way for broadleaf weeds. Now remember, you have 2 different kinds of weeds and 2 different kinds of treatment. One is the broadleaf weed, so you're using certain different things to treat that. And then you have the grassy weeds, and so you're using a whole different chemical range, or whether it be inorganic or organic, to treat that. So when you go to buy something at the store, be able to identify is it a broadleaf or a grassy weed. So here are a few of the things to be aware of, just like this one. A quinclorac is great for crabgrass and sandburs and clovers and some of the other leaves, broadleaves, but it's not safe for St. Augustine or centipede. So be sure if you have St. Augustine, whatever you're going to put down on it, make sure it says it works on St. Augustine. Otherwise, you could be killing it. Centipede, we didn't talk about. That's a grass that really doesn't grow here. If you go on the far east side of Dallas, is about the line where it starts to grow. It's a good grass. It just doesn't do here because of our soil and temperatures and things. Here's some more on the broadleaf weeds. Again, 2,4-D, dicamba. Some of those are not suited for St. Augustine, so you don't want to be sure you don't use those. Sedges, or nut sedge, is a common one. You can always tell if it's a sedge by the stem will be triangular shaped. You can see it's kind of a triangular shape, so you can reach down and feel the stem. It's easy to tell. Nut sedge is a whole different chemical because you're using, instead of a broadleaf or a grassy weed, you need a sedge control, which is a different type of chemical. Main thing that you see areas that you start to see nut sedge show up is usually if you're overwatering, because if it's in a drought situation, very rarely will nut sedge grow because it needs a lot of water. So you start seeing this pop up, you know that you're either holding water or you're watering too much. And it's hard to dig up because it's underneath the ground. It's got little nuts, and then it'll have a stem coming over here with some roots. Then it'll start another one, and then underneath you're going to go over here and start another one. And so if you try to dig it up or pull it up, you may get this one, but you probably didn't get that one. And so it comes right back up. So Anyway, a lot of them, if you want to try to treat it or need to, they have some that are like sedgehammer, some of those that are listed just for sedges. There's some nut sedge showing up along the edge where it might be getting too much water on the edge of the grass. Now you got spurge, which shows up during the summer. And you can see the spurge kind of getting here as it gets dry. It actually likes to dry. So as the grass kind of fades away because of the drought, then the sedge pops up. Mechanical method of taking it up a little bit each day, or you can use a post-emergent to treat it. There's another winter annual, which is the Philistine. You know, you see it in a very poor grass or very poor soil. Usually if there's doesn't have enough nutrients to keep the grass growing and the grass dies back, then this will show up. It's fairly easy to dig up because it covers a large area, but it just simply has a taproot here. You can dig down, get that taproot and remove it. Dead nettle is another one that has kind of a purple flower. It's a winter annual. Buttonweed can really get invasive. It's very low growing. Again, the post-emergent is one of the ways of treating that. If you get on a good pre-emergent program and you stay on it, you can help treat it as well. Rescue grass. So there are a lot of different grasses that can be an issue. You've got to get them treated and or keep a grass that's really healthy that will help choke it out. Glyphosate works, which is the main chemical in Roundup, but it has to be while all of the other grass is dormant. So if you got a Bermuda, it's going to have to be in the winter when everything's dormant. You got to be careful with St. Augustine, because it doesn't always go completely dormant. The same thing with Zoysia. Pre-emergent herbicides early to mid-September. Sometimes we can start them a little earlier if you get a lot of weeds showing. Annual bluegrass becomes an issue. But lots and lots of weeds. I'm just getting a few of them there. Ideally, the best organic treatment is hand removal because then you're not using any chemicals whatsoever. So you can either do them with a small trowel, you can do them with some type of weed remover, popper, whatever you want to do. I use an old long-handled knife that I got, actually a diver's knife that I got at an Army Navy surplus store. It's long and narrow and got edge on both sides, and it works extremely well for removing those taproots. So anyway, something to think about. If you got sandburrs, quinclorac works really good, but again, Bermuda and Zoysia only. But if you remember, if you have a sandburr issue, should be telling you, that's a red flag telling you that your nutrient levels are off, that something is deficient and is allowing that to grow. Otherwise, if it's in a good, healthy soil, you just won't have them grow because it chokes them out. All right, so anyway, something to think about. Crabgrass can be an issue. There are certain crabgrass killers, which again are different than your normal grassy weeds and things. So you may look at that. Goosegrass is very similar. It germinates later than crabgrass. So you may have to have a couple different applications to hit that. Bahia grass, goosegrass, lots of different weeds out there to think about. Rescue grass. Learn to identify them, and then you'll learn. It'll be easier for you to remember and to find the right treatment for it. All right, problem solving. Insects. Is it an insect issue? Is it a disease issue? Is it an irrigation issue? Is it a drought issue? Is it what? Who knows? So think about it. If this is your lawn and you've got an irrigation, where it'd be above ground or below ground sprinklers, and you're having water go up in the air like that where it's misting, that's the most inefficient way of doing it at all, because 50–60% of that water never reaches the ground, or never reaches the ground where you want it to be. So you need to look at, how can I adjust the pressure? Can I change out the heads? Can I do something so that I'm not misting it up? I'm actually throwing droplets out. You may have a misaligned head that's, got messed up and is going out on the driveway instead of the yard. You might have a stopped up nozzle. A lot of people don't think about that, but underneath every nozzle on a pop-up head, there's a small filter that periodically, after enough time, gets a little bit of dirt and grime and sand and particulates from the water, stops up that filter so that you're not getting water out through that nozzle, and you have something similar to what's showing there. You may have a leaky pipe, broken head, a leaky valve, maybe a broken pipe, who knows what's going on. So the only way that you're going to know is to periodically, if you have a below ground system, is to run it every now and then during the day, because most people have it coming on at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and most people are not up at that time. So if you have a system that you're running, find a Saturday or Sunday or a day that you have off, it meets the day, and go out and turn that system on for 5 minutes per station and look at it and make sure all the heads are coming up, make sure they're spraying where you want them to be and not on the concrete. Maybe a tree has gotten bigger and it's blocking a head. May need to, realign it or switch it. Maybe you put a bed in and trying to water the bed now from the lawn as well. So that usually doesn't work as well. So, once every 2 or 3 months, turn it on, walk around for 5 or 10 minutes on each station and look and examine it, make sure that everything is working good. Some new technologies are coming out, for turf. You have drip now that can be underground. So you can have it, put it down underground before you put your turf on, or if you want to go back in and redo it, you can trench through your turf and put down drip irrigation. So it's the most efficient way that we have of water. It's 80 to 90% efficient. It uses very, very little water, and all of it goes to growing what you need to grow. Instead of doing the misting type system that I showed you earlier, you might want to look at some of the new rotors like this. They come up, and instead of misting up, they send streams of water out. It's the most efficient top that we have, our nozzle. It can be easily changed out if you want to change them out yourself, or you want to have somebody do it, that's up to you. But what you have to do is locate that particular head, pull it up, hold it up, unscrew the nozzle, clean that filter out underneath, and then screw on the new nozzle that has this type of nozzle where it's coming out. And that can take you from 40 or 50% efficient up to about 80 to 85% efficient, just simply by changing that particular nozzle out. They cost anywhere from $1 to $3 or $4 a piece. And so you may just do one zone at a time, or depending on what your budget is, but it can really make it much more efficient. And the more efficient it is, then the better the irrigation is and get to the ground, less loss you have, and then the thicker and more healthier turf that you're going to have. Sometimes you get a fertilizer misapplication, and you can see, whether it's you're using that whirlybird or using the drop spreader. Usually this comes from the whirlybird, where people don't get a good even distribution of it. So you can see where they missed it and where they got it down. Yes, you can correct it by going in and filling in the blanks, but that takes another couple of weeks. And by the time you get that done, then those darker green spots have started to lighten up a little bit. So it's hard to ever keep it even. So just be careful when you're putting it down and you're paying attention. I wanted to kind of give you an idea of some things that people don't think about. I took this picture today of my front yard. That's the St. Augustine yard I've had in for 10 or 12 years. I mow it once a week, have not irrigated at all for 2021. So this is July 15th. So, we're 7 months in. We've had so much rainfall, there hasn't been a need to irrigate. It's nice and green, it's even, it's full. Could it be greener? Sure, yeah, it could. But again, with the water shortages and the amount of people we have moving into Texas, we really can't afford just to waste a lot of water. So I choose not to water at all unless I just absolutely have to. Use a mulching mower, and so I haven't put down fertilizer in years and years. It's good and thick and green, so I don't see any issue. I'm not saying that you should, but I'm saying that we probably don't need to fertilize as often as we do. And we probably surely don't need to water as often as we do. I don't do any weed control on this yard other than pre-emergent and Valentine's Day and Labor Day. And again, almost all of that lawn is in full sun. So just want to show you, I talk about it a lot when I do lawn talks. People say, well, what's your yard look like? I said, well, it looks good. And they said, well, how do I know what your definition of good is? So I thought, well, I'll just try to take a picture. And so as you can see, it's thick. It doesn't, you don't see any weeds. Nice and green. Not too bad for middle of July. Here's an area that is got a little patch of Bermuda starting, and that's been in there for a couple of years. It's right on the corner of the sidewalk and the driveway. I had some weed issues here several years back. I treated it and probably didn't get as, I don't have an in-ground irrigation system. So a few times I water with a hose and probably didn't get enough water down. And so the St. Augustine kind of faded away. Well, as soon as it does, then Bermuda will come in and take it. And so it filled that area in. I could take it, dig it out and replace it with St. Augustine's sod. I could do a lot of fertilization and watering to try to get it inch in and fill it up, but it doesn't look bad. And, you know, if you don't look real close at it, I don't think you can tell easily that there's two different types of grass there. And this one is out underneath the front shade tree. It's in that same front yard. So here's all the grass I was showing you earlier. This is a little bit darker. Part of it gets a little bit more shade so that, you know, breaks up some of the sun heat. But then when this flower bed gets watered, it gets the water, whereas the turf doesn't. And so that's getting out and helping this be a little bit greener around the edge of the flower bed. So I just want to show you there again, you know, what's happening in my yard on a daily basis and some of the things I do, just to show you that, you know, you may not have to do it as much as you may already be doing. A couple of things to think about. Aggie Turf, if you have any questions, you can go to aggieturf.tamu.edu. You can go to aggieturf./turfgrass weeds, see all the weeds and pictures of them and how to treat them. You can go to Aggie Extension, weed control and turfgrass, again, Aggie Turf for turfgrasses. But one of the most important ones is this one here, soiltesting.tamu.edu. If you have not taken a soil sample in the last year or two, you might want to consider doing that. Just simply type this in. It'll take you to the soil lab at College Station. Go down to the bottom of that next page and you'll see submittal forms. It'll take you to the next form, print out urban, if you're in urban, or it could be rural, depending on where you live. Urban soil testing forms, the 2-page form. It'll give you 1 page is to fill out and tells you how much it is and all the different kinds of things. And the 2nd page tells you how to do it, who to mail it to and all that. You know, you might want to consider doing that. $12 for a basic soil test. You send it in, comes back in about 10 working days, and it'll tell you what kind of nutrient levels you have. It'll give you suggestions on what you should put down. And it's a great tool in your toolbox. So soiltesting.tamu.edu is a great thing to remember. And I hope that you do it. It'll help you both on your soils and your flower beds and various different things there. That's it for turf.